My name is Christy Drutman, and I am the founder and media creator of my own podcast and media series called Brown Girl Green, where I interview environmental leaders and advocates about why diversity and inclusion is important in the environmental movement, as well as creative solutions to the climate crisis. I'm sure all of you are very concerned about the pandemic happening right now, but also about the bigger long-term threat of the climate crisis and figuring out how we can continue to get people to take action when we can't organize them in person. An important way to do this, from my own experience as both a digital media strategist and a content creator, is through social media. According to Data Reportal, there are currently 3.81 billion social media users around the world. That's nearly 49% of the entire world's population. The average user has around 8 social media accounts across platforms and spends around 2.5 hours using social media every day. That means we have an exponential amount of opportunities to engage people on the climate crisis using social media platforms. And all of us, climate scientists, policymakers, and activists, have an opportunity to create the cultural shift necessary to get people to act on climate immediately. My favorite way to use social media is through storytelling. While the data and the technology to build a sustainable, clean energy future is alive and well and here, it is clear that we lack the cultural momentum necessary to actually make these things a reality. I believe that even though there was a huge spark from last year's global climate strikes, which began to bring the climate movement into more of the mainstream media, we still need to build the buzz. The issue that I find is that even with the amazing efforts of folks like Greta Thunberg, Naomi Klein, Jane Goodall, Bill McKibben, and so forth, people who receive lots of media and press as the thought leaders of the climate movement, there are lots of voices and communities that don't receive the same kind of attention. And consequently, a lot of listeners and audiences who are not listening to the messages or the content of the climate movement at large because they can't relate to it. It doesn't have the same cultural nuance or connection that gets people to care. The global majority of people living on our planet right now are people who look like me. People with brown skin, brown eyes, and thick brown curly hair. They are black, they are brown, they are indigenous, they are children of immigrants, they are refugees. We have to consider who is in the global majority when we're thinking about solutions to the climate crisis and who's not being given a seat at the table in these conversations. The reason why this is such a huge issue is because if we don't know people's names, we don't know their stories, and we don't feel connected to their lives. This can be scaled up to the environmental defenders around the world from countries in the global south who are being killed while protecting their land from extraction and mining. The Philippines, the country where my family is from, is now considered the deadliest country for environmental defenders in the world. There was up to 46 recorded deaths in 2019, making the Philippines ground zero for why we need to think about the climate crisis and how it's impacting communities at large. If we don't even know the names of these land defenders or their stories, who knows what other lives could be at stake? The same goes for small, grassroots environmental justice organizations like Black Millennials for Flint, Communities for a Better Environment, the Asian Pacific Environmental Network, Kalikasan, and so forth, organizations that are largely operated and run by people of color, but who do not receive the same kind of attention, funding, or resources as bigger environmental organizations or institutions. These people are not just statistics or faces on a screen, they are symbols for what the climate movement needs to do to move forward. We need to be telling their stories as quickly as possible about the climate crisis and how it's impacting people's real lives every day. Because presenting their stories may be a matter between life or death. In order to increase the diversity and the inclusiveness of our movement, we must continuously fight to give diverse voices a platform as well as the resources necessary to push their ideas forward on how we can build a more sustainable world. This includes ensuring that people of color in particular are not just used as tokens for political ploys or for, even activist speeches, etc., that they are actually given the emotional, financial, and physical support for their safety and their well-being in the battle against the climate crisis. And then there's people like me, young people of color who are actually taking climate media into their own hands by trying to reach new diverse audiences. We are emerging content creators that are combining science, policy, culture, and community into condensed, creative, and nuanced pieces of content that inspire, engage, and motivate people, particularly people of color, to take action on the climate crisis. Yet, a lot of us don't receive as much grant funding, support, or recognition from the wider mainstream media or the climate movement at large for that matter. Our work is sincerely grassroots and a labor of love to share the digital stories, the skills, and new thought leadership independent of mainstream institutions. I hope people will continue to acknowledge and support environmental media creators, especially those from diverse backgrounds, who are not just sitting around waiting for a cultural revolution on climate to occur. We are standing side by side, building it together every single day. Diversity is young, it is disabled, it is indigenous, it is elderly, it is black, it is brown, it is queer. Diversity is what makes up the fabric of our planet, and it's time we orate the stories of those who deserve a seat at the table who otherwise have been ignored. As we adapt to a changing climate, I hope everyone can use storytelling and media as tools to build intentional, innovative, and meaningful relationships with people around the world. People who don't look like you, people who don't think like you, and people who don't act like you. We need to embrace diversity as not just something tangential or accessory, but essential as an abundant asset that we need to tap into as a climate movement at large. We need to tap into diversity because it is our time to truly create stories that will touch the hearts and minds of our families, our friends, and our communities, who may finally feel inspired and ready to join us in this beautiful fight for our lives.